Today is the first day of this December 1982 7-day sesshin. We will work together on a koan taken from Zenkei Shibayama's book Comments on the Mumonkan. It's number 16 and the title is Bell Sound and Priest's Robe. Before starting on this, let us say something about listening to a talk, which actually refers to all listening, not just to a talk in a retreat. Words may be used which you've heard many times over, and there the danger is, it probably has a physiological, chemical, electrical basis, that a word which is recognized immediately triggers associations, memories, and one is caught in that and can't hear and see what is being said. This is why listening is attention. Attending without knowing, as though hearing for the first time with new ears. Which means not coming to a talk with any expectations of what I wish she would say or what I'm afraid or apprehensive she might say. Because when there's either expectation, wishful expectation, or apprehension, both of this distorts the hearing. Then one part of oneself lives in the expectation or in the fear, and that affects the hearing and distorts the perception of what is being said. One may or may not agree, but for the time being can agreement and disagreement be suspended, as it were, and there just be this openness of listening. Just as one listens to the waves washing in over the stones, without interpreting, giving it a meaning. And yet, what is being said is not just waves washing in over stones. There's something being said which maybe can be observed in oneself. So one is no longer dealing with words which one either accepts or rejects or remembers for future use, but one sees what is being talked about in oneself. At that instant, there's not someone who talks and someone who listens. It's the person or personalities are totally irrelevant. But it's very relevant is the clarity of seeing and the absence of distortion. There may be distortion in what is being said. If there's open reception, that is seen. And it can be brought up when there's a meeting between us. And we'll look at it together. Is it so or isn't it so? We don't realize that we have this ability. Not we have it, it's there to see clearly. You don't have to follow anybody. Don't take anybody's word for anything. But test it, look, examine, inquire if it is so. Here. Where's the only place where I can start looking? Not knowing. If I already know what's there, then that impedes the freshness of a new observation. This is how the koan reads. The name was Bell Sound and Priest's Robe. I'm just picking out one translation. It has the gist of it. Ummon said, "Look, this world is vast and wide. Why do you put on your priest's robe at the sound of the bell? Or the robe, or someplace it's called a 7-piece robe. It doesn't matter what you put on. The world is vast and wide. Why do you put on this robe at the sound of the bell?" Well, we'll look at this koan bit by bit, so that maybe we can see the whole. First he says, look, or listen. Which means, can everything be wiped? Can the slate be wiped clean in this looking and listening, not knowing what's going to come? If an idea comes up, see it. And because you see it, maybe you can be done with it. Or put it aside momentarily so that the seeing flows like this little river out there. The world is vast and wide. What is the world? The way we talk and think about it, the very word itself suggests something out there. Because of this immensely strongly ingrained feeling of someone separate sitting here, enclosed in the skin. What is the world? Apart from the word? Can we put our finger on it? Touch it? Maybe for the moment not considering people. Just this natural world. It is this huge lake, time's silvery gray, or sparkling in the sunshine. The sun hits it, makes sort of a golden pathway across it. When there are no clouds, it's deepest of blues. Last winter it was a huge sheet of ice. And there are these rounded mountains, sometimes so close that you really feel you can touch them. They're right there. And then at times shrouded, fog and mist, sort of unapproachable, as it were. as the wind making ripples, washing in the water, washing it back. And that little rivulet, it's wetting everything in its path. Old leaves, twigs, stones, everything is washed over, and then it moves on. Where to? I don't know. As you look at it from the bridge, you don't know. The moment you think, of course you know, it goes down there to the lake. At the trees, without any leaves. Stark branches just covering the sky. Yet on each one of them there are little buds, sort of poised, wrapped tightly, sort of a waxy wrap. Underfoot there's squishy grass or dirt, a mass of compacted leaves. Few of them have retained their form, crumpled up. And then there are animals. Feeding, mating, giving birth, taking care of the young, dying or being killed for food. Until at times there's just a few bones left, dry bones. At night, darkness, or stars galore, wherever you look, stars or the moon, vast and wide. If human beings don't intrude, then there is order in all this. But wherever human beings intrude with self-seeking interest, which is narrow and goal-oriented, then the disorder starts, even in the natural world. I remember as a child, I loved to thumb through atlases. Not because I was interested in geography, I was not, because it entailed a lot of memory. But the colors. And I was told, before I could read, and later could read, that these are the physical maps and these are the political maps. The physical maps, there was a lot of green and blue, and then yellow for the foothills, brown for the mountains, and real dark brown for the very high mountains, and then a few white patches for those that are covered eternally, I was told eternally, by snow. And as you flipped the page, the same appeared in many, many different colors. A lot of red and yellow, a lot of red and pink, I remember. And square shapes And the mountain range, or this couldn't be seen anymore. It was all cut up. And these were the nations, the countries. Because in the course of studying geography, or what went under the name of that, often our atlases were collected and redistributed because border lines had changed. A country had been absorbed, conquered, so a new atlas came out with a different border. Another country disappearing, or more cut up. This is how we live. On a globe which is whole mountain ranges, whole plains and fields and tundras and steppes, hills and oceans, but they're cut up into my country and your country and their country, his country, hers. And the borders constantly change because constantly one country is conquering another one or being conquered by another one. Momentarily, two of such created entities may live what is called peacefully, temporarily, next to each other. This is because for a time being, the self-interest happens to coincide. But if, for whatever happens, the self-interest does not coincide, there is tension and the potential of war, mutual conquering or mutual annihilation. And the people who make up this country are mostly identified with it, with its name, its history, its flag, its symbols, its holidays, all of which creates an image of oneself as being and so, American or German or Arab, Palestinian. Pride, national pride, which is already inculcated, fostered, and nurtured in the little children. During this last vacation, we were south on the ocean, and on our way back we happened to come through Gettysburg. Neither my husband nor myself had ever been there, and we stopped there, and the next morning we visited the historical sites. The whole town is one historical site, and already on menus in the restaurant or pamphlets you receive even before you enter the national park headquarters there, it's an altogether different national park from anyone I've ever been in. Everywhere you read about this being the place where the greatest war ever fought was fought. The greatest war, certainly, of this country and maybe of the world. And the way it's put, you feel the pride, the feeling of deep significance for the future of this country, which is the present now. Because there are so many exhibits, you're told on little pamphlets that you should at least stay for 3 days to take it all in. We went to one of them, which is in, one of these buildings there, in which there was what is called an electronic map. Sort of a theater in the round, but what you're looking on down to is the map of Gettysburg and surroundings. Before the show starts, parents are asked to keep their children quiet. And if this is not possible, to have the children, to take the children outside, where someone will take care of them. Actually, right next to us was a father with a little boy. It seemed to be really a very nice relationship between the two. But then as the boy kept talking, it was before the show, the father said, "But you must be quiet now." And he said, "I am quiet. I'm talking quietly," and he whispered. But then as he kept whispering during the show, there were very few people there. Father got nervous, and he started carrying out the boy, and he cried. He says, "I won't do it again. I'll be quiet. I'll be quiet. I promise I will." I'm trying to be sentimental. I'm just reporting something that happened. Well, then we could all, in quietness, follow this electronic map, which showed who was where at what time. And how many were killed on this day, and then the lights blinked out. And then there was a regrouping, and then this failed or succeeded. And within 3 days, 52,000 people were killed. Did you realize that? In 3 days, 52,000 people were killed in Gettysburg. Literally, in many cases, brother killing brother, which is no different from one human being killing another. Whether one is white and the other is black or not, that doesn't matter. All in all, in that particular war, 700,000 or 800,000 people were killed. And it was the greatest war, because it determined the future of this country. Each side, or the soldiers fighting on each side, as the commentator very objectively and factually pointed out, thought that they were fighting for the right ideal. This is what we fight over, is ideas and ideals. And of course, each one thinking that mine is the right one. If this conviction exists, there must be fight. It's inevitable. Either verbal fight or physical fight. Or non-verbal fight, tension. You don't want to say anything, you don't want to hurt the other person, but gosh, how wrong they are. You hate their guts. So this world is not vast and wide, it's narrow, confined, encircled by this feeling of my self-interest, my ideals, my country. Not long ago, hearing over the news, there was a conference in Geneva, I believe, over trading. Now with unemployment hitting just about every country wants to limit imports, but wants to export, of course. And everything is looked at, I guess, and maybe there at that conference somebody tried to look a little bit wider and vaster. But usually we can't do this because we're bound to our identity. We have to take care of our country, of our city, of our state first. industry is moving out of our state, there may be unemployment in my state, and our whole political system is such that it takes care of self-interest. There is no place in it, nothing built in for global vision. Because everyone is identified with locality, which may be on a small level, and then it extends, and then it goes as far as the country, and usually it doesn't go much farther. On the smallest level, how do we live in our family? A man and a woman? Maybe it's the same way, as long as coincidentally our interests are parallel, they don't collide. I'm putting it negatively, maybe we could say that we have the same interests, how wonderful. Then you can live together. Make a go of it with a minimum of friction. Maybe you're building a business together, or even, quote, cultural interests or whatever. We have the same. So it is a possibility of living together without constant argument and friction. But what? We don't have the same interests. Whether it be in music, or sex, conversation, spiritual practice, work, whatever. Let alone how to bring up a child. Right now we're just looking at a man and a woman living together. What if there is not the same interest that each one has? Then there is collision. And it must inevitably continue as long as one clings to one's own interest, my self-interest. We may not put it in those words. We may couch it into much better sounding words, but looking at it, if one will do it, because one really wants to know what is at the source of this difficulty together. Then one will discover self-interest, self-enclosure in that interest, insisting upon it or defending it, because one is identified with that interest. It's me. And if another person attacks it, he or she attacks me personally. I'm identified with my interest, which is my image of myself. There's instant pain when it is attacked or slighted or not given the full room to expand. And the same vice versa. So what happens on the smallest social level? Is it any different than what happens in this so-called world out there? Or if I disregard any relationship, I'm living by myself. Aren't there inner battlefields? One interest against another. I want to do this, but I also don't want to do it. Or I want to do this and I want to do that at the same time, and I can't. And what conflict, what dilemma, what frustration or irritation. Or I want to be like this, I want to become that. But something tells me I'm like this. I may not want to look because I'm afraid to see what I really am, because it doesn't jibe with the image I have or want of what I want to be. If there is a strong image of what I want to look like to myself and to the outside world or to certain people, then I cannot look at what I really am, because it hurts too much. It's too much conflict. Or if I do look, do I sink into depression? Depression meaning I don't want to be that way. It's terrible, which is judgment, comparison with what I could be or what other people seem to be like. They seem to be able to do that. Why can't I? Ask yourself this question, whether what goes inside this human being or inside the family or whatever small-scale relationship one finds oneself in, a staff or whatever, is that any different to what's going on in the world? At root, what is the root of strife and battle? We talk peace and cooperation, but we don't want to give up or don't want to even look at self-interest, at this deeply entrenched feeling of being an individual in his or her own right. We have that expression. We may draw the conclusion, all right, I have to give up myself. And then look at it. A new image crops up. I have to be a self-effacing person, which is just a new robe one puts on, a new disguise, rather than just squarely, nakedly seeing this constant self-interest, self-promotion, clinging to the image of oneself as being this or that. Maybe a positive one, maybe a negative one. We cling to it because we want to be something we can think, to think about ourselves in some kind of a term. Because the feeling that we are a separate entity is so strong. And yet as we work on this stuff, together or alone, with a real wanting to understand this, to see to the very bottom of it, we will inevitably find that what's happening in myself here is happening in all other human beings. There's self-interest, fear of being nobody, escape from that, ambition to get someplace, anger if the ambition is thwarted, brief happiness when one has arrived, which is followed by boredom with what one has accomplished and new needing to achieve something. Or the fatigue of it all, the weariness, the indifference, and the sadness. Never getting what one wants, of being left. A really deep inner sadness, sorrow, of loss, That's in all human beings. No matter who you talk to, when or where, if you start going below the surface of things. So in looking at one human being here, meeting it face on, without any escape, even if it's frightening or terrorizing, to meet the terror face on, whatever comes up, that is meeting all human beings. And can that meeting be vast and wide, meaning no confining judgments, standards, morals? Just that, in the midst of nothing, no opinion about it. No conditioned response to it. Just the fear, the terror, the pain, the selfishness. Not even the word. The word is necessary for us to talk about it and communicate. But in facing it, the word is not necessary. It may come up and then put it aside because it gets in the way of this direct touch with what we are, actually, from moment to moment. And that happening in boundless space, not the idea of it, but the absence of anything that confines or holds us back from doing this. Umon says this world is vast and wide. Shibayama in a comment says, from the standpoint of the world, I myself am the world. From the standpoint of I myself, the world is I myself. When the world is I myself, there is no self. Is that so? There's just fear. There's just anger. Or just nothing. But is it my anger, my fear, my nothingness? Then there's self. And then the world is out there someplace. Mostly to be afraid of or to have opinions about, to judge. Is it possible what he says here? When the world is I myself, there is no self. When something comes up, is there self? Self being all our past ideas, memories, images, experiences, which are ready to jump, to judge, to react. I like this, I don't like it. I must overcome this. I want to get rid of it. Oh, this I want to keep. I want it to stay forever. Then that's self. Not a little entity in here, but a very conditioned way of thinking, which distorts and colors what is seen, the anger or the disgust, discouragement, depression, or elation. Can that just be there as it is without knowing what it is? Then there's no self. in not knowing, there's no self, there's only not knowing. Nothing to hide in not knowing. It's from this state that maybe Umon puts this question. The world is vast and wide. Just what is, no self. And he says, why do you put on your robe at the sound of the bell? We touched upon this in the opening talk last night. Why are we here? Why are we doing this thing? The question is not about putting on a robe. Even Umon asking in the setting of a monastery, has monks who are wearing robes. It's not about putting on a robe, but it's much deeper than that. Why do we do what we do? At the sound of a bell, something happens and we do something. We respond, we react. In what way? The sound of a bell just comes to mind, played an important part in the first conditioning experiment by Pavlov. Most of you may know about it. A dog was being fed, and every time the food was being consumed, a bell was sounded. And then one day, no food, but just the bell. And the dog started salivating profusely. The bell had become a conditioner. Somebody says something to you about what you did. Is that a conditioner? That immediately something is triggered? Hurt, anger, withdrawal, fear. Is it inevitable? For the dog, it was inevitable. Something had happened in the brain circuits, and that had been established, and that was there. Because there are also experiments you can uncondition, which means you have a new conditioner to uncondition the conditioner. But it's always of the same kind. For a human being, it's the only way to be free of one conditioning to get another one, to adopt a new one, which may do away with the old one, but then now I've got the new one. I may not be aware of it, I may rationalize it away, but it runs me, it controls me. I want to know that, I want to see into that. Freely, clearly, fearlessly. Because it's a burning question to know whether a human being can really be free. If it can't be free, there'll be strife, battle, war forever. as it has been since time immemorial. So why do we put on the robe? Here, of course, we don't have to put on a robe, but as I mentioned before, this is not so much about robes, even though a lot could be said about robes. One person mentioned this to me today in a meeting, that not putting the robe on for the first time, one realized what the robe had meant. One had thought one was beyond all that. But all of a sudden became very clear what that robe had meant when one wasn't wearing it. And then this person said, I'll put it on again because it's really more comfortable than the pants. It was very important to see that. The feel of the rustling sleeves. Or just, one may not be able to verbalize it all, but it is also heavy with associations. The first time one put on a robe, one was somebody different from what one was before or from many, many other people who don't do this thing. And there's separation there because there's identification. So is one free to wear it or free not to wear it? You can say, yes, I am. But it may not be so. You have to test it out. I want to make an issue out of something which is no longer or is not an issue for people, but maybe this person also thought it was no issue. And to this person's surprise, it was. Not an issue, but there had been an image there. And it was seen and there was freedom from it. So when the bell rings in the morning, wake-up bell, let's say, what is this matter of putting on the clothes or getting up? Some people don't take the clothes off because then one doesn't have to take them off and put them on. One can just move. But still one was asleep and there's the bell waking one up. Why do you get up? Why do you come here? Why do you do this thing? Why do you sit? And notice that when a question is asked, and this is part of this koan is this very question, why? The power it has, the influence, the impact it has. Because if the question why is asked, most of the time, we immediately want to give an answer. We start thinking. It's another conditioning. To think our way out of or into something. Which means we don't observe what is actually going on. We scan our brain for causes and reasons and explanations and give those to ourselves or to others. So we don't have to live and look and be in touch directly without any explanation, without thinking about it, which is enormously difficult. It takes tremendous attention or energy and wanting to do this thing, rather than living in the habitual, conditioned movement of thinking, which is relatively safe because we've done it and it's something familiar about the process and comforting and satisfying. It fills the mind, so the mind need not be empty and see things, come in touch with things like loneliness or fear. So why are we here? And don't give an answer. But rather be free to see if something reveals itself, if a motive reveals itself on its own. It will if we don't cover it up with already known explanations. If you ask, why do I put on the clothes? Well then, I don't really know, never thought of it. And I will not think about it. I'll do it and see. And be open, really porous. Nothing sealed off which may be discomforting. Or to notice that, hey, something is sealed off there. Something I don't want to look at. And if I don't want to look at it, I'm so quick to rationalize for or against. Can one ask why? Or question who? Or mu? Or what is it? And not immediately fall into a stream of thinking, of looking for answers? Really, truly not knowing? Which means leaving this pseudo-security of knowing. You can't leave it. Who is it that leaves? But do you realize that you really don't know other than what you think, what your words and memories are? It's just a thin film. Who am I? Just a thin film of knowledge and memory and images and aspirations? Who? Or what is it? Not knowing? We'll stop here for today.